Okay, so get ready, because today we are going deep, deep into your gut. We're talking about the bacteria in your microbiome and get
Hmm.
this, how they actually organize themselves.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing. We're at this point with the research where we're moving past just figuring out what bacteria are in there. It's like we're finally uncovering how it all works together, how these bacteria form their own little societies inside us.
Right. It's not just a random jumble. It's organized.
Yeah.
And that is what's blowing my mind.
Exactly. It's like we've discovered this whole inner world. And the craziest part is that in this research, they actually found evidence for this type of organization in data sets for 15 different diseases.
15. Seriously, I had no idea it was so common.
Yeah, it really drives home the point that this structure might be a fundamental part of how our gut microbiome works, no matter what our health looks like. And the best analogy I've heard is to think of your gut like a city.
Okay, I'm picturing it. Like
Yeah.
tiny bacteria with little briefcases rushing to work.
Well, maybe not exactly. But the important thing is that these microbes aren't just randomly hanging out. They're part of these structured communities with specific roles to play. They interact with our bodies in very specific ways.
So in this study, the researchers dove deep on this idea of bacterial guilds.
Hmm.
It's like they're part of these little social clubs, but inside our intestines.
Yeah, and like any good social group, they have their own dynamics, even rivalries. The study really focused on two main guilds that seem to be in this constant back and forth for control.
A microbial tug of war happening in our stomachs.
Mhm.
Okay, I am so ready to hear more.
So to make it easier to follow, let's give these guilds some names. We can call the first one Team Fiber.
I love it.
Yeah.
Because they are the good guys, right? The ones we are all rooting for in this epic gut battle.
Yeah.
So who are the members of Team Fiber?
So this guild is made up entirely of bacteria from a phylum called Firmicutes. You can think of phyla like the major branches on a family tree, but for bacteria.
Hmm.
And Firmicutes, well, they're all about that phylum.
Okay, so they're the ones breaking down all the veggies I'm supposed to be eating.
Exactly. Their main job is to break down fiber, and then they produce these beneficial compounds, especially one called butyrate.
Wait, hold on. Before we go further, you're saying that by eating more fiber, I could be boosting my gut's production of this butyrate. What is so special about it?
Butyrate is amazing. It's like this miracle substance for your gut.
Yeah.
It's been linked to reducing inflammation, and there's even some evidence it could protect against some types of cancer.
Yeah, I'm already rethinking my lunch plans. But okay, so that's Team Fiber. It's like the friendly landscaping crew of your gut keeping everything healthy and running smoothly. But you said there was another guild in this power struggle, right?
Right.
And this one's a little more, well, it's not Team Awesome, is it?
Well, no, not quite. Maybe not as catchy a name, but we can call them Team Trouble for the sake of our analogy.
Works for me.
Mm,
And these are the troublemakers, the ones associated with less than pleasant gut outcomes.
it's true. This guild is a little more diverse in terms of its members. It's got bacteria from a bunch of different phyla, so it's not like they're all bad inherently.
Right. I mean, every ecosystem needs a bit of diversity.
Exactly. It's all about balance. However, this particular guild has been linked to increased inflammation in the gut. And we know that inflammation can have effects throughout the body. And researchers have found connections between this guild being dominant and a range of health problems, from type 2 diabetes to even inflammatory bowel disease.
So it's less about good bacteria and bad bacteria and more about making sure the right balance is there.
Precisely. It's about having the right players and the right amounts to keep everything running smoothly.
That makes a lot of sense. So how do we make sure that Team Fiber is strong and doesn't get outnumbered, besides, actually eating our vegetables?
Now that is the million-dollar question. And luckily, this study actually gives us some clues. It turns out that it's not just about the amount of fiber we eat, but also the type. And that's where things get really interesting.
Okay, so we're back. And I have to know, what kind of fiber gives Team Fiber that boost they need?
Well, this study didn't give like a super specific fiber guide. I mean, this is all really new research, but they did find that the Team Fiber bacteria were really good at breaking down something called arabinoxalan. They also liked cellulose.
Arabinoxalan, cellulose.
Yes.
Those are definitely words. Okay, wait. Remind me again, what kinds of foods have those?
So arabinoxalan, you'll find that in things like wheat bran, rye bread, some vegetables, and then cellulose, that one's a bit more common. It gives structure to plant cell wall, so it's in a lot of things. Leafy greens, celery, even the skin of fruits.
So basically all the stuff my mom always told me to eat. Maybe she was onto something. But hold on. This study focused on type 2 diabetes, right? What about everyone else? Does this Team Fiber, Team Trouble thing even matter if you're not diabetic?
That is the fascinating part. They took what they learned from the type 2 diabetes study and they tested it across 26 other data sets covering 15 different diseases.
Wait, are you serious? 15? So they found this two guild setup in people with heart disease, schizophrenia, even cancer.
You got it.
Yeah.
And here's the really wild part. Not only were these guilds present across all those different conditions, but they were actually pretty good at predicting things like how severe the disease was and even how well someone would respond to treatment.
Okay, now that is really interesting. So just by looking at which guild was winning out in someone's gut, they could tell if a treatment was likely to work.
In some cases, yes. And remember, this was all based on their gut microbiome before they even started treatment. It's like their microbiome was holding clues about their overall health and how their body would react to different things.
Okay, time out for a second. Before we even go any further, we have to talk about how they figured all this out. Because
Mhm.
analyzing the microbiome is not easy, right? We are
Yeah.
talking about trillions of bacteria, each with their own unique genes. It just seems unbelievably complicated.
You're telling me. It is mind-blowingly complex. But that's actually part of what makes this research so cool. They used a really clever method based on identifying what they called stably correlated genome pairs.
Stably correlated. You have to break that down for me.
Okay, so imagine you're trying to understand how a city works, but you can't actually see the people. You just have their cell phone data. Who calls? How often do they call? And how do those patterns change over time?
So they're basically eavesdropping on bacterial phone calls.
Pretty much. They looked at which bacterial genomes tended to show up together, but even more importantly, they looked for pairs that stayed consistent even when other things changed. Like when someone started a high fiber diet or if they had a certain illness, those really strong, stable pairings, those were the ones that suggested something meaningful was going on.
So it's about finding the bacterial BFFs, the ones who are always hanging out no matter what, and those are the ones that matter most.
Yes. Because those tight-knit relationships, those suggested that there was some underlying function that was important for the whole gut ecosystem to stay balanced.
And it worked. They found these stable pairs all clustered together, forming the guilds. It's like they made a social network map, but for the gut.
Precisely. And what this map showed was that these networks, these guilds, they can tell us a lot about our health and even our future health risks.
Okay, that is incredible. But before we get too carried away with all this talk of personalized gut predictions,
Always good to be cautious.
right, someone has to be. It's super important to remember that there are some limitations to this study. Like with all scientific research, we have to keep things in perspective. What are your thoughts on that?
You're absolutely right. Even with all these insights, we have to remember that this two-guild model is still really simplifying something incredibly complex.
So this two-guild model, it's helpful, but we have to remember it's still just a simplified way of looking at something that's way more complicated.
Yeah, it is. Our gut microbiome, it's more like a rainforest than a city, really. I mean, there are just countless species in there interacting in ways we don't fully understand. So focusing on these two guilds, it's like we're only looking at the trees and vines. We're missing all the other life happening beneath the surface.
Right. There could be all sorts of other things going on. Maybe even more guilds within the gut that we just haven't discovered yet. That could be playing a role in different functions or maybe even contributing to specific diseases.
Absolutely. And that's something that this particular study wasn't really designed to uncover.
Because it was already working with so much data.
Exactly. They were using metagenomic data from a huge range of sources. So that allowed them to identify these big picture patterns, like these core guilds. But to get into the smaller details, to really see how those guilds might be different between different people, or even within the same person over time, that would require a totally different approach.
So more research is needed, which in science is pretty much always the case.
That is true. But that's also what makes it so exciting. We're always learning more, always pushing the boundaries of what we thought was possible.
Even with its limitations, this study still feels like a huge step forward in understanding how all of this works, how our gut bacteria interact, and how that affects our health.
It gives us a framework, and it opens up so many new possibilities. Just imagine if we could analyze someone's microbiome and then give them totally personalized diet recommendations to specifically support their own personal team fiber.
Whoa, now that is personalized medicine.
Mm.
We could be looking at a future where gut health is at the center of how we approach healthcare. Instead of just treating diseases, we'd be focused on building a healthy inner ecosystem to keep us well from the inside out.
It's a really powerful idea, and this research brings us closer to that becoming a reality.
I'll tell you what, after this deep dive, I am definitely more motivated to eat my fiber. Are you?
Absolutely. Maybe we need to start that Team Fiber fan club.
I am so there. And on that note, we'll leave you to think about the amazing and complex world of your gut microbiome. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive, and until next time, keep those microbes happy.